Let's talk about this distortion effect achieved in After Effects. The idea here is to create distortion, drive it to an expression, and also explore some ideas on how we can make it look cool and techy. So first off, let's jump into After Effects and talk about the base of this effect, which is wave warp. So in After Effects, I have this render of a washing machine spinning around in space. And what I'll do with it is drop an effect called wave warp. And what this will do is just that, it's gonna create some waves. And something interesting about it is that the waves actually move, and you can set the time of how they move. So let's go to the wave warp itself and change the wave type to square, which is something that looks a bit more techy. We can increase the wave height just to see what it's doing. And I mainly want it to happen horizontally, so I'm gonna turn the direction 90 degrees. So now if I move the time here, you'll see the lines move downwards. They're a bit slow. These are quite a few frames. These are quite a small number of frames, so I want to see more movement. So I'll increase this number to 2.5. And let's see what we got. Okay, that's looking okay. So let's get started with setting it up to look like a distortion happening throughout the video. First, I'll set the wave height to 0 at frame 0. I'll go down a few frames and then add a keyframe for that 0. Go down a few more frames, increase the amount, and then go down again and set this to 0. You can select this and press U, and you'll see here are keyframes. The main plan here is to make it happen just for a very quick moment. So right now it's not really quick. It seems to be easing in and out of the two states. So what we can do is squeeze up these, spread out this 55. In fact, I'll make it 70. Let's make it 77. And we'll move this over and then add another one that's also 77. And then move that over. So this way it animates in, chills a bit, and then animates out. And this will make it look a little bit less ordered. That's looking better. We can close this gap and maybe give it less time to transition. There we go. So that's one way to do it. We can put this set over here. Another is to just do as we had before. So 0, increase the number, and then 0 here again. So this looks a lot better when it's moving. So I'll actually swap these out. So I'll use this back here when it's still. And then I'll use these here at the front when it's moving. So this can be like a subtle sort of accent to it. There we go. Okay, cool. So there's the basic effect that we were going for, the distortion on its own. Now that we have this, we kind of want to make it just a bit more interesting than just one wave. So let's explore some ideas of what we can do to make this look just as cool as the render we saw at the start. So I'll go somewhere here where I can see some distortion happening. And this is what I'm going to use as the frame to style this. But before I do the splitting, I'm also realizing that my wave height is animated here. And should I want to add more animation to it, I'm going to have too many wave warps to edit. So the first thing I'll actually do is create a new null object. And in here, I'll add a slider control. And we'll call this distort amount. Then I'll go to the wave warp, select the wave height, and just drag the pick whip to the distort amount slider. And then we want to take the keyframes, because now everything's going to be 0. We need to take the keyframes and copy them to the slider. And to do that, we need to Control C, select slider, paste. Now the keyframes are here, so we can remove them from this one, and it should go back to working the way we wanted it to. So let's get rid of that unevenness. So I'll go to that style frame again, and then I'll increase the wave width so that we have big chunks like this. I can kind of leave the bottom so that it has one small strip there, just to break it up a bit more. So that looks okay, still has the same animation, but now let's add another one. So I'll select the wave warp, Control D. That's gonna make another copy. And down here, what we'll do with the wave width is we're gonna turn it down. And now we start getting these bites. It's sort of like the two interfering with one another. We kind of want to find a nice value that makes it look a bit different, in the sense that we want to have one really thin strip here, a bit bigger one here, a large one here, just sort of different looking, for lack of a better word. So we want to have this sort of thing where we have some slim ones, some long ones. And that will come from messing around with the wave width, giving us those two kind of mixing together. Another option we have is also the phase, and this will just offset it up or down. So we can use this to kind of split these up like that. So that looks pretty cool already. But yes, there is a but. There is something else that's off. It's that we have both of them kind of moving vertically at the same speed. So it's kind of looking like the whole pattern is just moving down at the same time. So on the wave speed, we'll actually increase the lower one to 5. And that should make it sort of pass by a bit faster and just give it more unevenness. So cool. We have the first basis of the distort effect. There's a whole bunch of, we could maybe add more of these. We could mess around with the style, say change the bottom one to sawtooth, leave the top one as square, and that'll give a whole different kind of style. But I think that's something I can leave to you to mess around with and try and figure out. But for now, I'm going to leave this as square, the two of them as square. Perhaps one last thing we could add, just to help add some variation to this, is to go to these guys, press EE. That's going to show both expressions, and we'll multiply the bottom one by 2. And that's just going to make it distort even more. So since we have two effects happening, we probably want to turn these values down. So I can select these two keyframes and then just turn down their values at the same time, like that. And then now we have something a bit more subtle. All right, so we've done the distortion, we've done the expressions. Now let's take a look at how we can make this look a bit more interesting. So in Blender, I went out and rendered a wireframe version of this animation, which looks like this. And we've just basically replaced its usage here so that we can see it. But now let's put it behind the actual solid one, and you'll see we actually can't see it at any point. This is mainly because wave warp uses the same sort of random seed all across. So they're both distorting, but they're both distorting in the same way. This can be nice in that we can, say, mask out a specific section and then make it look like it's all part of the sequence. But I personally prefer it to have its own look as well. So to mix this up, we'll go to the freestyle one, which is this one, the one with the edges. I'll press EE, which is going to reveal all the expressions, all the controls of the expressions. And the first thing I'll do in wave height is just increase this to 0.3. Just add a 0.3 at the end there. And it's going to distort it just a little bit more. Obviously, okay, that's way too little. So let's do 4 times 4. And now it distorts more. But since it's lining up with the solid render, it's a bit difficult for someone to tell that it's actually the outline. And also, it's the same problem we had before. We have two things lining up. We want to break these up so that they look a bit more different. So we'll do the same thing we did with the other wave warps. We could mess around with the wave width to give them different alignments. We could also mess around with the phase. So let me just undo that to take them back. We can also mess around with the phase to sort of push these to be a bit behind. We can even put the thin lines now to be a bit ahead, so that now they have very different looks. And the cool thing with doing it this way is, since it's the wave warp, we only see it when the distortion is happening, which is pretty cool. All right, now let's move on to something else we can add. That's one bit. The next is to take our solid render, add an effect called Find Edges. And it's just gonna add these nice edges to it. I'm gonna set this to add, move it down, and let's see. It also has the same distortion as everyone else, so we can't really see it. So what we'll do is the same thing. Move the phase a bit, move this phase a bit, and we'll crank up their multipliers, because these are just thin edges. We can probably get away with doing 5 here, and here doing ×3. That's really gonna just spit them out a lot further. We now have a very nice RGB split and distortion effect. Now, to top it off, we can add an adjustment layer, and on it we're gonna add an effect called Venetian blinds. Set the width really low, then put them sideways. That gives it a nice TV-like look. And we can do the same here. We can duplicate this, increase the width, increase the completion, and play around with the feather to give it a TV-like feel. There we go. Sweet. Now let's take a look at the RGB split effect. So what we want to do is to take this and convert it into its 3 colors. So we'll take this and add we'll make 3 copies. So this is the first one, so that we have 3 of the same layer. And then we'll add an effect called arithmetic. And then set the operator to AND. We'll set red to 255. Then we just copy this, paste it here, set this to full, set this to 0, and again paste, set this to 0, set this to 255. Then you select the top 2 and choose add. So we've basically taken all those channels, separated them, and now we're adding them back together. Now, as usual, it's not going to show any difference, but what we need to do now is to do our variation tweaks. So let's grab this guy. Let's go to red and just tweak the phases. Go to the bottom one and we'll just tweak its phase as well. You don't necessarily have to do both, depending on how much color you want to see. And finally, at the top, we'll add a glow. Which really, if we crank up the threshold, we can make sure the glow is only on these bright spots, so that when our machine is still, it's not too crazy. So let's go radius up, intensity down. Cool, and there we go. We now have a nice RGB split and distort effect. So mess around with wave warp, mess around with different ideas, try and figure out how you can combine what you know so far and what you've figured out over the time to create a nice new style. And that's it for this video. See you in the next one.